I vanished without a word after catching my wife cheating. A year later, she showed up at my door, begging for another chance. From the outside, our marriage looked picture perfect. Two ambitious professionals building a life together in a downtown apartment, saving up for our dream home. Rachel was brilliant, confident, magnetic. I was rough around the edges, a little quiet, but she saw something in me that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. We'd met at a cookout 5 years ago, and within months, I was head over heels. Even after the honeymoon phase faded, I still believed we were solid. Sure, work got hectic. I traveled a lot for my job in technical sales, and Rachel was climbing the corporate ladder faster than I could track. But we still shared laughs, inside jokes, quiet Sunday mornings. I clung to the belief that love was enough. I didn't realize until it was far too late that somewhere in the blur of deadlines and late-night emails, I had started losing her.
It started with little things. Missed dinners, unanswered texts, a coldness in her touch that I can't explain. Rachel had always been driven, but suddenly her ambition seemed to come with a wall I couldn't get through. She started working late more frequently, coming home hours after I'd gone to bed, the scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering on her clothes. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd snap back, "I'm just tired," or "Don't make this about you." And maybe I believed her at first. Maybe I told myself this was just stress, that we all go through seasons, but the seasons dragged into something darker. She began locking her phone, retreating into the spare bedroom she called her home office, where she spent hours with the door closed. Our intimacy dwindled to nothing. Each time I reached out, emotionally, physically, I was met with distance, avoidance, excuses. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her inconvenience. I remember one night in particular. I had tried to make her laugh with a dumb joke over dinner, something we used to find hilarious. She barely looked up from her phone. "You've changed," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. She looked at me then, not with love, not even anger, but with exhaustion, as if being with me had become a chore she no longer had time for. The woman who once pulled me into her world with every glance now couldn't even meet my eyes. And in those silences, in her growing absences, a pit began forming in my stomach. I didn't have proof, I didn't have answers, but I had a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Something was deeply, horribly wrong.
It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, just a quick grocery run after Rachel got home from work. I offered to help unload the bags from her car, something I'd done countless times before. But that night, everything changed. As I opened the back door to grab a sack of produce, something caught my eye, tucked just beneath the passenger seat, a flash of pink lace. My heart stopped. I reached in, pulled it out slowly, almost unwilling to believe what I was holding. A bra. Hers. But not just any bra. It was the one she wore only on rare nights, the kind she reserved when she wanted to feel sexy, when she wanted to be desired. I froze. My mind scrambled for logic. Had she changed in the car for some reason? Was it just forgotten laundry? But the smell of her perfume mixed with the lingering cologne that wasn't mine, none of it added up. My hands were shaking. I shoved the bra back under the seat like it burned me, grabbed the groceries, and walked inside. When I entered the kitchen, Rachel glanced at me and stopped mid-sentence. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, forcing a half-smile. I stared at her, stunned, mute. Every instinct told me to scream, to confront her, but I said nothing. I don't know how I kept my composure. My chest felt like it was caving in, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. I had just touched evidence of something sacred being broken. But I swallowed it down, stuffed the storm inside. That night, I laid awake staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. Her betrayal, now a silent guest in our bed.
The following Friday, I decided to fight for us, at least what was left of us. I left work early, picked up her favorite wine, ordered flowers from the same florist we used for our wedding, and spent hours preparing a dinner she once said reminded her of our first anniversary. I even ironed a shirt she liked on me, set the table with candles, and played the jazz playlist we used to slow dance to in the living room. For a moment, I dared to hope. When Rachel walked through the door, her heels clacking against the hardwood, she looked momentarily surprised. "What's all this?" she asked, eyes skimming over the table, then back to her phone. "I thought we could have dinner together, just us." She blinked, then exhaled sharply, brushing past me. "I can't tonight," she muttered. "I'm meeting the team at Red Lantern for drinks. It's networking." I felt something inside me twist. "Can't you skip it? Just tonight?" She gave a dry laugh. "Why are you being so clingy lately?" I couldn't speak. I stared at the plates, the flickering candles, the damn roses. "I miss you, Rachel," I said quietly. "It feels like we're roommates, strangers." She rolled her eyes and started walking toward the bathroom. "Don't be dramatic." As the shower turned on, something snapped in me. Rage, grief, humiliation, all boiling in my chest. I grabbed the bouquet and tossed it into the trash, followed by the wine and the meal I had poured my heart into. Every clang of the silverware in the trash felt like a final nail in the coffin of our love. When she emerged, dressed to kill, she glanced at the table and raised an eyebrow. "No dinner?" "Enjoy your night," I said, my voice hollow. She hesitated, then smirked. "Try not to mope." I watched her walk out the door, and in that moment, I knew whatever we had was already gone.
The moment the door clicked shut behind her, a cold stillness settled over the apartment. My hands trembled as I picked up the second phone, the work phone I had silently slipped into the backseat of her car during her shower. It was a desperate move, one I never thought I'd make, but I needed the truth. I opened the tracking app, heart pounding. The dot began to move, heading across town, straight toward Red Lantern. I grabbed my keys and drove, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I parked across the street, engine off, lights dimmed, staring at the glowing red neon sign above the bar. For an hour, I waited, watching, breathing in short, ragged bursts. At 9:16 p.m., I saw her. Rachel stepped out of the bar, not alone, but with him. He was tall, sharply dressed, his hand grazing her lower back as they laughed, intimately, familiarly. My stomach twisted. Then, as if mocking me, he leaned in and kissed her. Not a timid, accidental brush, but a slow, deliberate kiss. She didn't pull away, she leaned into it. I couldn't breathe. I felt like a ghost trapped inside my own body, forced to watch the funeral of my marriage from a distance. They walked to another car, his. She slid into the passenger seat like she'd done it 100 times before. I followed, keeping a safe distance. 10 minutes later, they pulled into a hotel parking lot. I stopped on the side of the street, watching as they stepped out of the vehicle, laughing again, holding hands. She looked radiant, beautiful, alive. I was the corpse. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers went numb. When the door of the hotel closed behind them, I knew this wasn't a mistake, this was a choice. A life she had already chosen, one that didn't include me. That night, I didn't go home, I just drove.
I didn't remember how long I'd been driving. The road stretched endlessly through darkened woods, headlights cutting through the silence like a scalpel. Rage pulsed in my temples, but underneath it was something colder, emptiness. I passed towns I didn't recognize, gas stations still lit at midnight, faces I'd never see again. Somewhere along the highway, I found myself pulling off into a gravel lot next to a weathered bar called the Hollow Oak. It looked like a place where no one asked questions, and that's exactly what I needed. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the low hum of a jukebox playing country Heartbreak. I sat at the bar and ordered a whiskey neat. When the bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, handed me the glass, she tilted her head and said softly, "You look like you just got hit by a train." I half laughed, half choked. Feels about right. A man sitting a few stools down looked over. Flannel shirt, rough hands, quiet presence. "You want to talk about it?" he asked, not unkindly. I almost told him to mind his business, but something about his voice grounded me. So I did. I told him everything about Rachel, the affair, the hotel, the years I'd poured into something that wasn't real. He listened without interruption. Then he said, "Name's Wade. I've been through what you're feeling. You're standing at a cliff right now, and I know what happens if you jump the wrong way. You lose yourself, or you build again." He pulled a folded slip of paper from his pocket and scribbled something down. "I've got a trailer out near the hills, quiet, nothing fancy. If you need a place to breathe, to figure things out, it's yours for as long as you need." I stared at the paper, not sure if it was pity or grace, but I was too numb to analyze it. All I knew was that home was no longer home. And maybe this stranger's kindness was the first thread of something new, something honest. "Thanks," I whispered, not sure who I was anymore.
The next morning, I drive out to the location Wade had scribbled in that crumpled napkin. A narrow, winding road led me through a stretch of pine trees, the air colder, cleaner, like the world was telling me to breathe for the first time in weeks. At the end of a dirt path sat an old but sturdy trailer parked beneath a canopy of towering trees. Beside it, a modest wooden cabin stood on a small hill overlooking the valley below. The land was wild, peaceful, unjudging. Wade was already there, leaning against his truck, sipping coffee. He gave me a nod like we'd known each other for years. "It's yours," he said simply. "No rent, just watch over it, fix what you can, heal if you need to." I stepped inside the trailer. It smelled faintly of cedar and old memories. There was a bed, a tiny kitchen, a desk by the window that framed the mountains in the distance. It wasn't much, but to me, it was salvation. That afternoon, I drove back into town like a ghost. While Rachel was at work, I began quietly moving my things out of the apartment, piece by piece. My clothes, my laptop, my guitars. I didn't touch her things. I didn't leave any signs. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life, smiling when necessary, but each night retreating to my sanctuary in the woods where the silence didn't lie. Rachel didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. The night before I planned to leave for good, I placed my wedding ring on the kitchen table next to a single note. Just 5 words, etched in ink, and finality. I hope it was worth it. And then, without ceremony, I walked out the door, locking it behind me one last time.
The trailer creaked faintly behind me as I stepped inside for the first night as a man no longer tethered to betrayal. The silence was different here, not cold like the one that had haunted our apartment, but heavy with solitude, real and grounding. I collapsed onto the worn mattress, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling as if expecting it to fall in on me. But it didn't. Nothing did. For the first time in months, the world didn't crash. It just paused. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees like whispers of an old life trying to call me back. I didn't answer. I let it pass. Rachel didn't text that night. Not yet. I imagine she came home, saw the ring, the note, maybe even panicked. Maybe she cried. Or maybe she just stared blankly, unmoved. I would never know, and I didn't want to.
Each breath I took in that trailer felt like a rebellion against the man I had almost become. The man who would have begged, pleaded, forgiven without a second thought. But that man died the night I watched her walk into a hotel with someone else. I lit a small fire outside and sat on the step with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The mountain air cut through me, but I welcomed it. It burned away the fog. It reminded me I was still here. Not whole, not yet, but free. And freedom, I was beginning to understand, wasn't always loud or glorious. Sometimes it looked like a tiny trailer on borrowed land and a man who finally chose himself.
The days in the hills blurred together in a muchati quiet rhythm. At first, I woke up with panic still clinging to my chest, reaching for a phone that no longer lit up with Rachel's name. But as time passed, that ache began to dull, not disappear, just soften, like a wound that had scabbed over, still tender but no longer bleeding. I filled the silence with small tasks, repairing the trailer's old hinges, clearing the path to Wade's cabin, chopping wood even when I didn't need the heat. There was something primal about using my hands again, about sweat and blisters and bruises that weren't emotional. It made me feel human, like a man reclaiming his own skin. I stopped drinking as much. The temptation was there, sure, especially on the nights when I'd hear a song we once danced to or when a dream of her would jolt me awake, her voice still echoing in my ears. But I didn't reach for the bottle, I ran instead. I'd hit the trails just after dawn, pushing my body until my lungs burned and my legs trembled. And in those moments, halfway up a hill with nothing but trees around me, I didn't feel like a man betrayed. I felt like someone being reborn. Wade checked in every few days, never overbearing. Sometimes we talked over coffee, sometimes we just sat on the porch and said nothing. He understood the power of silence better than anyone I'd ever met. One morning, as mist rolled off the ridge and the sky turned golden, I realized something. I hadn't thought about Rachel in 2 whole days. No anger, no sadness, just absence. And in that stillness, I smiled. Because finally, I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning to live again.
It happened on a gray Saturday morning. I had driven into town for groceries, but my usual coffee at a small shop tucked off Main Street. I was seated by the window, sipping a black rose, editing some work files when I heard it. My name, Paul? I froze. The mug trembled slightly in my hand. Slowly, I looked up and there she was, Rachel. She stood across the street, looking thinner, paler, older somehow, but still unmistakably her. She rushed toward me like a ghost from a past I thought I'd buried under pine trees and silence. My instincts screamed to run, to disappear again, but I didn't. We found a bench outside a boutique a block away. She sat first, legs shaking. "I've been looking for you," she whispered, eyes glassy, "since I heard you moved out here." I said nothing, just stared at the woman who once called me her forever. "I ruined everything," she said, voice cracking. "When you left, it broke me. I deserved it, I know, but I didn't think you'd vanish like that." Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "My boss found out. Things got messy. I quit. He, Mark, got transferred. He blamed me. I told his fiancée. They broke up. I haven't seen him since." She bowed her head and cried, raw, open sobs. People walking by gave us glances. I didn't move. I let her cry. "I've lost everything," she choked out, "except the guilt. That stayed." For a moment, I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just weightless disconnection. Like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. She had searched for me, yes, but she hadn't found the same man she left behind.
She looked at me with tear-soaked eyes, searching for something, hope, maybe, or forgiveness. "Paul, I came here because I need to know if there's a chance, any chance at all. I don't expect you to forget, but maybe we could start over?" I stared at her. Her voice still had that softness, that careful rhythm that used to calm me.
But now, it felt hollow, like a song played too many times. Once beautiful, now just background noise. I shifted on the bench, feeling the old ache rise in my chest, not from missing her, but from remembering the version of myself that once needed her. "I don't think you understand," I said slowly. "You didn't just cheat. You didn't just break vows. You broke me. You made choices over and over again. You killed the version of me who would have waited, who would have forgiven." Rachel flinched, but didn't interrupt. "I didn't even recognize myself after you left," she whispered. "I tried dating again, but no one compared. I couldn't even look at another man without thinking of how I destroyed the only one who truly loved me." She reached out to touch my hand. I pulled away. "Don't," I said. "You're not in love with me. You're in love with what I used to be, before the hotel, before I saw you kiss him. You don't want me, you want absolution." Her lip trembled. "That's not true." "It is," I replied, voice steady now. "You don't get to come back just because it hurts now. I built something out of that pain. I found peace. I can't let you poison it." She broke down again, full body sobs that shook the bench. But I sat still, staring ahead. For the first time, her pain didn't move me. It confirmed everything I already knew. I had become someone she no longer deserved. She walked me to my truck in silence, her arms crossed tightly across her chest like she was holding herself together. At the door, she turned one last time. "If you ever change your mind," she said, voice trembling, "I'll be waiting." I didn't respond. I simply nodded, climbed in, and closed the door with finality. Through the windshield, I watched her shrink into the background. This woman who once held my heart, now just a shadow fading in the rear view. Back at the trailer, the stillness welcomed me like an old friend. The wind moved through the trees with a kind of knowing grace, as if nature itself had witnessed the encounter and approved of how I'd handled it. I stood outside for a long time, breathing in the scent of pine, feeling the pulse of the land beneath my boots. The mountains didn't care about broken vows or second chances. They offered only space, and the truth that healing isn't found in returning, but in moving forward. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who would have forgiven too easily, who would have traded his peace for a lie wrapped in longing. That man was gone now. In his place stood someone tempered by pain but no longer ruled by it. Rachel's tears weren't enough. Her regret came too late. Love, when weaponized, leaves permanent scars, and some scars should never be kissed better. That night, I poured a single glass of whiskey and stood by the fire pit, watching the flames dance against the dark. There was no victory, no revenge, just clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't hate her. I simply didn't need her. She would move on, eventually, and so would I, but not together. Never again. This peace, it was mine, and I wasn't trading it for anything.